U.S. District Judge James Boasberg issued a verbal order blocking President Trump from using the 227-year-old Alien Enemies Act to deport non-citizens, which Trump had invoked earlier. He said in court, "Any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States."
Trump's attacks on the judiciary raise legal and constitutional alarms. President Donald Trump intensified his attacks on the federal judiciary this week following a ruling by U.S. District Judge James Boasberg that blocked the administration's mass deportation of Venezuelan migrants. The decision, issued earlier this month, ordered the government to halt deportation flights and allow migrants the right to due process hearings before removal. Trump responded on social media, calling Judge Boasberg a crooked judge and demanding his impeachment in all capital letters. The post came as House Republicans aligned with the MAGA caucus introduced articles of impeachment against 3 federal judges who previously ruled against Trump. If Representative Brandon Gill follows through with his public pledge, Boasberg would become the 4th federal judge targeted. The public backlash prompted Chief Justice John Roberts to issue a rare statement rebuking Trump's call for impeachment, emphasizing that judicial disagreements should be resolved through the appellate process, not political retaliation. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, Roberts said. Despite Boasberg's order, the Trump administration allowed deportation flights to continue over the weekend. Reports confirmed that planes carrying migrants landed in El Salvador, contradicting the administration's prior communications and sparking new legal concerns. In response, Judge Boasberg scheduled a hearing and requested specific information from the administration, including flight logs and passenger details. Rather than comply, the Department of Justice cited the state secrets doctrine, a legal defense typically reserved for matters of national security, to withhold the information. Legal experts immediately questioned the use of this doctrine in an immigration case, especially since the deportations had been publicly documented and shared by the administration itself through official videos. Boasberg, who also serves as chief judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and the Alien Terrorist Removal Court, has high-level security clearance. Critics argue the government's refusal to provide basic logistical information undermines the integrity of the court and the rule of law. The invocation of the state secrets doctrine is seen by constitutional scholars as an attempt to avoid judicial scrutiny. There are standard legal processes, such as in-camera reviews, that allow judges to privately review sensitive material. These options were not utilized. The federal judiciary has faced mounting pressure throughout Trump's presidency. Multiple judges have reported threats or harassment after issuing unfavorable rulings. Judge Tanya Chutkan received a swatting threat during Trump's federal criminal trial. Judge Arthur Engoron, who ruled against Trump in a high-profile civil fraud case, received a bomb threat the night before issuing a $454 million verdict. Even Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by Trump, was criticized by MAGA-aligned groups for not siding with the president in key decisions. Despite ongoing threats, the judiciary continues to assert its constitutional role. Boasberg is demanding that the administration provide information on deportation flights, including when planes left the U.S., where they landed, and who was on board. The court gave the government until noon the following day to respond. If the administration fails to comply, Judge Boasberg may pursue contempt proceedings. Legal experts say the government could face either civil or criminal contempt charges. Civil contempt could involve daily fines for non-compliance. Criminal contempt, if proven intentional, could result in sanctions or jail time for officials. The controversy reflects broader concerns about the erosion of legal norms under the Trump administration. Legal analysts point out that Trump's repeated public attacks on judges and courts are part of a long-standing pattern aimed at undermining institutional checks on executive power. Simultaneously, another legal challenge involving the administration emerged this week. A federal judge ruled that Elon Musk, who oversees various federal innovation projects under Trump, unlawfully ordered the shutdown of USAID operations without congressional approval. Judge Theodore Long found that the action violated the Constitution and deprived Congress of its authority to decide how and when agencies should be closed. The judge ordered the immediate restoration of USAID functions and warned that violations of the injunction would result in penalties, including possible contempt charges. The actions taken to shut down USAID, including the apparent decision to permanently close its headquarters without the approval of a duly appointed officer, likely violated the The court made clear that Musk and all others bound by the injunction could face personal legal consequences for defying the order. The ruling adds to growing scrutiny over the Trump administration's use of executive power to sideline legal and procedural safeguards. In a related incident, Trump invoked a wartime statute to justify action against a Venezuelan gang, despite the absence of any formal declaration of war. The administration also sent federal agents to detain a Columbia University student and green card holder without a warrant. The student, who had publicly criticized the administration's stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict, was flown to Louisiana, where legal advocates say the government is seeking to deport him without formal charges. The administration has also faced criticism for deporting a mixed-status family to Mexico, including a 10-year-old American citizen undergoing treatment for brain cancer. The deportation removed her from access to necessary medical care, raising ethical and legal concerns. These events have led legal experts and advocacy groups to question whether the administration is deliberately testing the limits of judicial oversight. Critics warn that this strategy, if unchecked, could push the country toward a constitutional crisis. Although Trump currently lacks the Senate votes needed to execute a full purge of the federal judiciary, his track record of targeting judges has had a chilling effect. His rhetoric, combined with legislative efforts from allies in Congress, signals a growing willingness to challenge foundational legal norms. The courts, for now, continue to respond with procedural rigor. Boasberg's insistence on answers and his rejection of vague legal defenses indicate that at least some judges are determined to uphold the Constitution, despite mounting political pressure. Whether these efforts are enough to counteract executive overreach remains to be seen. As one legal analyst noted, this is not just about deportations or immigration. It's about whether any president, now or in the future, can ignore the law with impunity. The legal standoff between the Trump administration and the federal judiciary escalated further this week, as U.S. District Judge James Boasberg signaled that contempt proceedings are now on the table. The Department of Justice's refusal to comply with a straightforward judicial order involving basic information about deportation flights has drawn widespread condemnation from legal experts and intensified scrutiny of the administration's approach to executive authority. At issue is the administration's deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants, despite a court ruling halting such actions until due process requirements were met. Judge Boasberg had issued a clear order on March 15th, prohibiting further deportations of individuals who had not received a hearing. He further ordered any planes in transit to be turned around. Rather than comply or offer evidence of compliance, the Trump administration declined to provide flight data or the identities of those deported. Instead, DOJ attorneys claimed the information was protected under the state secrets doctrine, typically reserved for national security cases. Legal observers have widely criticized the move as both legally unfounded and a deliberate obstruction of justice. Judge Boasberg responded by calling for a Friday hearing and warning that contempt proceedings were being considered. The judge is requesting evidence that could prove whether administration officials intentionally violated his order, a move that could lead to civil or criminal penalties. Civil contempt could involve daily financial penalties. Criminal contempt, if proven, could carry much heavier consequences, including potential jail time for government officials or attorneys involved. Experts argue the administration's behavior is unprecedented in a domestic immigration case. The information Judge Boasberg requested, flight times, departure and arrival locations, and passenger data, is typically routine in immigration enforcement litigation. Moreover, the administration had already published footage of the deportation flights on official government platforms, undermining the assertion that the information was too sensitive to disclose. Judge Boasberg is not new to handling highly sensitive material. In addition to serving as Chief Judge of the United States District Court in D.C., he oversees the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and the Alien Terrorist Removal Court, roles that require top-level security clearance. His capacity to handle classified material is not in question. The administration's decision to invoke state secrets in this context has therefore been interpreted as a legal maneuver to stall accountability, not protect national interests. Critics of the administration say this marks another chapter in a broader campaign to undermine judicial authority. The Trump administration has repeatedly clashed with federal courts over immigration, voting rights, and civil liberties. When rulings have gone against the president, his response has often involved personal attacks on judges, threats of impeachment, and pressure on Congress to intervene. This week's events underscore the stakes of that campaign. Legal scholars say the misuse of legal doctrines like state secrets threatens the integrity of the justice system. The doctrine is meant to protect national security, not shield the government from consequences, said constitutional law professor Diana Linden. What we're seeing is a disturbing politicization of legal tools designed for exceptional circumstances. Alongside the courtroom developments, the humanitarian fallout of the administration's immigration crackdown is also growing. Several hundred Venezuelan migrants have been detained in facilities in El Salvador, a country that agreed to accept them under a little-publicized agreement with the Trump administration. Reports indicate that the Salvadoran government is receiving financial compensation in exchange for housing the deported individuals. This arrangement raises additional legal and ethical concerns. Advocacy groups argue that the migrants' transfer violated both U.S. and international law, including protections afforded under the Refugee Convention. Human rights monitors also report poor conditions at the facilities where the migrants are being held, prompting calls for international oversight. A particularly high-profile case involves the deportation of a mixed-status family that included a 10-year-old American citizen undergoing treatment for brain cancer. The family was sent to Mexico, where the girl lost access to her U.S.-based medical care. Legal advocates have decried the move as both inhumane and unconstitutional. Meanwhile, civil liberties groups are raising alarms over a separate case involving a Columbia University student who was detained without a warrant. The student, a legal U.S. resident, had been vocal in protesting the administration's stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. He was reportedly flown to Louisiana, where officials are pursuing expedited deportation. Observers point out that the student's case could set a dangerous precedent for free speech. Deporting a legal resident for expressing dissent raises constitutional questions about due process and First Amendment protections. Legal groups are preparing to challenge the move in court, arguing that the administration is weaponizing immigration enforcement to silence criticism. Parallel to these events, Congress is becoming more entangled in the conflict. Several House Republicans, led by members of the MAGA caucus, have already filed articles of impeachment against 3 federal judges. If impeachment articles are introduced against Boasberg, as some lawmakers have indicated, it would mark the 4th such attempt in less than 6 months. Chief Justice John Roberts' earlier statement, denouncing the use of impeachment as retaliation against judicial rulings, appears to have had little effect on this strategy. Analysts say the movement is designed to intimidate the judiciary and create a chilling effect on legal decisions that disfavor the administration. These efforts are unlikely to succeed legislatively, given the 2/3 Senate vote required for conviction, but the symbolic nature of these actions could still have lasting consequences. Legal experts warn that constant threats of impeachment can erode public confidence in judicial independence. At the same time, the Department of Justice is facing internal and external criticism for enabling these tactics. Current and former DOJ officials have expressed concern over the department's role in shielding the administration from court orders. Some have called for a congressional inquiry into whether DOJ attorneys are acting in good faith or following political directives. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner said the department's use of the state secrets doctrine in this case was an unserious legal move designed to delay proceedings. They filmed these flights and released them publicly, then turned around and claimed the details are too sensitive to share with a judge. It's not just absurd, it's contemptuous, he said. Kirshner also pointed out that federal judges have tools to handle sensitive information, including ex parte and in-camera reviews that allow for secure private disclosure. The DOJ knows this. They've used these procedures before. The refusal to do so now only strengthens the appearance that they're hiding misconduct. The timeline for next steps is moving quickly. Judge Boasberg is expected to issue a show-cause order requiring the Department of Justice to explain why it should not be held in contempt. If contempt proceedings proceed, it could become a pivotal legal moment, one that tests whether the judiciary can enforce its authority in the face of executive defiance. Legal observers agree that what happens in this case will have implications beyond immigration law. At its core, the dispute is about the balance of power between the branches of government, and whether courts can compel accountability from a president who has repeatedly challenged their authority. As hearings loom and public scrutiny intensifies, the Justice Department and the Trump administration face mounting pressure to justify their actions. The legal conflict between the Trump administration and the judiciary has moved beyond the courtroom and into broader territory, testing not only domestic constitutional norms, but also the United States standing on the global stage. The administration's ongoing defiance of court rulings, use of extraordinary legal defenses, and heavy-handed immigration enforcement policies have drawn condemnation from legal experts, allies, and international human rights observers. The core legal issue remains unresolved. Judge James Boasberg has made clear that if the Trump administration continues to withhold critical information regarding unauthorized deportations, the court will escalate its response. A formal show cause order is expected within days, requiring the Department of Justice to explain why it should not be held in contempt. Failure to comply could lead to fines, legal sanctions, or even jail time for officials found in violation. The administration's refusal to provide the most basic logistical information, such as flight departure and arrival times, continues to raise serious doubts about its compliance with the rule of law. Even more concerning, legal experts point out that the state secrets doctrine was invoked despite the fact that the information had already been made public through government channels. This posture, according to former federal judges and prosecutors, is not only legally weak, it's politically dangerous. Maya Colston, VO. We're looking at a moment where the executive branch is challenging the authority of the courts with no legitimate constitutional justification. That's not a dispute between branches. It's an erosion of the separation of powers. Meanwhile, new reports indicate that the Department of Justice has also begun quietly purging internal staff who have raised objections to the administration's legal strategies. Some longtime DOJ attorneys have been reassigned or pressured to resign after expressing concerns about the handling of court orders and due process violations. Whistleblower complaints are reportedly being reviewed by internal oversight officials. In Congress, Democratic lawmakers have demanded an independent investigation into whether DOJ officials have violated ethics standards or obstructed justice. Senate Judiciary Committee members are preparing a formal letter requesting testimony from senior officials involved in the deportation cases and the use of the state secrets doctrine. House Republicans aligned with Trump have dismissed these efforts as political theater. But the tension is growing on both sides of the aisle, with a small number of moderate Republicans expressing discomfort with the administration's legal overreach. The international response has been equally sharp. Human rights organizations have condemned the administration's actions, particularly in the case of the 10-year-old American citizen with brain cancer who was deported alongside her undocumented family. The girl's removal from life-saving medical care has become a rallying point for advocacy groups, who argue the administration is violating both domestic and international humanitarian laws. The United Nations Human Rights Council issued a statement expressing concern over what it described as the arbitrary and politically motivated removal of vulnerable individuals, and called on the United States to comply with its obligations under international law. Similar concerns have been echoed by the European Union and several Western allies. Legal experts also warn that recent developments involving Elon Musk and the closure of USAID operations raise broader questions about executive power. A federal judge ruled last week that Musk, acting in a senior administrative capacity, violated the Constitution by ordering the shutdown of a federal agency without congressional authorization. The judge ordered the restoration of USAID programs and warned of contempt penalties for further violations. This ruling has amplified concerns that the administration is systematically bypassing legislative oversight. Jamie Ellison, VO. What we're seeing is a blueprint for dismantling federal institutions without legal authority. It's not just about one policy. It's about how decisions are made, who makes them, and whether those decisions are subject to democratic accountability. Beyond the legal and political ramifications, there is growing concern over public trust in democratic institutions. Polls conducted this month show a gradual but noticeable decline in confidence in the judiciary, especially among Trump's base. Conservative media figures have echoed the president's claims that federal judges are politically biased or illegitimate, a message that appears to be gaining traction with some voters. This perception is having real-world consequences. Judges who have ruled against the administration continue to face threats, harassment, and public smear campaigns. Security around high-profile judges has been increased in recent weeks following multiple incidents including bomb threats and attempted swatting. At the same time, the public reaction is becoming more polarized. Protests have been held in multiple cities, with demonstrators calling for stronger protections for immigrants, judicial independence, and constitutional norms. Activists and legal scholars alike argue that the courts cannot be left to defend the rule of law alone. The upcoming midterm elections are also likely to be shaped by these events. With Democrats currently unable to pass legislation in the Republican-controlled House, much of their messaging has shifted toward voter mobilization and court challenges. Several Democratic candidates have held town halls in traditionally conservative districts, focusing on the erosion of legal protections under Trump's leadership. Trump's approval ratings have also shifted. While still maintaining a strong core base, national polling shows a decline among independent and younger voters. Concerns about healthcare, cost of living, and the perception of lawlessness have impacted the administration's standing. Despite this, the administration shows no signs of changing course. Trump continues to defend the deportations and insists that judges opposing him are politically motivated. In a recent televised interview, he dismissed Chief Justice Roberts' criticism, saying, "Donald Trump, VO, he didn't mention my name. A lot of people are calling for that judge to be impeached. He's radical left. He's an Obama guy." Statements like this have only deepened concerns about the president's view of judicial authority. Legal analysts note that such rhetoric, when paired with coordinated congressional efforts to impeach judges, reflects a serious departure from past norms, even during periods of high political tension. While the courts have thus far resisted pressure, the challenge they face is significant. With limited enforcement power and increasing threats, judges rely on the cooperation of other branches to uphold rulings. If the executive branch refuses to comply, and the legislative branch refuses to act, the constitutional balance begins to falter. What happens next in the Boasberg case could set a precedent for how courts respond to future executive defiance. Contempt proceedings, if initiated, would mark a rare and historic moment, one that could establish whether judicial authority is enforceable in practice, not just in theory. As legal experts, lawmakers, and citizens continue to monitor the unfolding crisis, one theme remains constant: the principle that no person, not even the president, is above the law. Whether that principle holds firm in the months ahead may well define the future of American democracy.